Hi, I'm Leanne from BatLadyHerbals, and welcome to my video. So if you've been following my channel, you've probably seen me talk about a family of plants called the Malvaceae family. And the Malvaceae family, everywhere in the world you find it, there's only one species that's not edible raw, and that's cotton. Well, today I wanted to introduce you to another member of the Malvaceae family that's considered to be a Class 1 invasive here in Florida. And that is this plant right here, commonly known as Caesar's weed or Caesar weed. The scientific name is Urena lobata. And if you get up close and personal with these flowers, you can see how they resemble hibiscus, which is another member of the Malvaceae family. You'll also notice that especially this particular plant has ants crawling all over it. The nectaries provide a good food source for a lot of our insects, both native and invasive. And these ants are going after all that nectar that can be found in those nectaries. Now, this is actually an average height specimen for what you find here in Florida. They can get upwards of 8 feet, but most of the time they grow in areas that tend to get mowed down a lot. So most of the time you'll find them about 5 feet or shorter. A lot of people consider this plant to be one of the more obnoxious plants that you come across in Florida, especially hiking or camping. Because as you can see, these clusters right here, when they dry out, they have all those little burrs on them. And these things tend to get stuck in everything. And because the burrs are all over, they're almost impossible to get out without ripping something or hurting yourself. And this is one of the ways that they spread. Because while the cattle won't eat it, and a lot of the native herbivores stay away from it, they do help spread it by getting those burrs caught in their fur. And like I said, this is considered a Class 1 invasive now. It was actually introduced to Florida from Africa in the late 1800s, sometime before 1882. And by 1897, it had escaped captivity. It was introduced as a cash crop because on the older specimens, you can see this one's starting to get a little woody. The stems can be turned into fibers through a process called retting, which is partially rotting the woody stem of this herb and pulling out the separate fibers. And those fibers are rough, kind of like a jute, which is where it gets another common name of African jute or Congo jute. Now, I did say it was edible, and technically it is, but if you ever see one of these plants and feel the leaves, especially on the bottom part, there's all these hairs called trichomes, and they're star-shaped, so they're kind of pointy and irritating. So it kind of has a feeling somewhat like a very soft sandpaper. And a lot of plants that are edible that have a papery, sandpapery kind of texture, when you cook it, that texture goes away. This plant doesn't. That texture kind of persists through the cooking process. And like with most plants, the texture is better when it's younger and it's not as harsh and spiky of a trichome. So in some areas of the world, they do eat the young shoots as a vegetable on a regular basis. In most areas of the world, it's still considered a famine food. And if you're ever looking at any kind of foraging documentation, anything to do with eating wild food, and it says famine food, the reason it's a famine food is you don't want to eat it unless you're in a famine and have no other choice. That sandpaper texture is enough to turn most people away from this plant. Now, the flowers are edible too. And like with all mallows, if you pull it out, Come on. Well, this one's not cooperating, but you can see that mucilaginous texture. It is a little bit sweet, but for the most part, it's a tasteless flower. The benefit, though, is in that mucilaginous goop that comes when you crush it. So you can use the flowers, and the seeds have some of this mucilage to it too, to thicken up soups and stews, just like with okra. But the mucilage makes it really beneficial as medicinal. And every part of this plant can be used medicinally. The flowers, because of that mucilage compound, are really good to soothe a sore throat and to help stifle and prevent coughs. The leaves have been used to help treat malaria and pneumonia and any kind of like viral or bacterial illness that usually accompanies a fever, like a common cold or the flu, things like that. Now, the leaves also, along with the root, have added benefits of being antibacterial and antifungal and just in general antimicrobial. So you can make decoctions, teas, or even just poultices to help with wound fighting, to help cleanse out the wounds, and also to help stimulate the healing of those wounds. So one of the amazing things about this plant is that it is a traditional medicine in pretty much every part of the world that it's natural in, and has become a medicine here for some of the natives since the late 1800s. But a lot of traditional herbs don't make it into a lot of scientific research for one reason or another. The main reason is that there's a lot of herbs that we can study, and there are very few scientists comparatively. But this plant has been studied for quite a long time for a lot of its benefits. They found all kinds of medicinal compounds that are present in the plant and have found lots of uses for it that were traditional that are now backed by science. One of the things this plant has been studied for is its uses on skin. Now, this plant is a great source of antioxidants, so just in general, it's going to help fight off the ravages of aging and help keep you looking and feeling more youthful. But it specifically works on the skin as well, and there are lotions and poultices and washes and all kinds of external applications that have been traditionally used, that this plant has traditionally been used in, and science has backed most of those up. This plant is great to help heal some bruises and speed up that healing when it comes to the bleeding just under the skin. I already touched on wound care a little bit. Any kind of inflammatory skin conditions such as eczema and psoriasis, this plant has traditional uses for. Some of the other traditional uses that have been studied by science are uses in the gastrointestinal tract. Now, Urina lobata is considered to be a diuretic herb, which means that it's going to help to promote basically the ridding of liquid wastes in your system. So it's going to help to support your kidneys and any of the detoxifying systems of your body. But it is also a great source of fiber, and so it also works as an antidiarrheal, which is one of its more studied uses. Now, for that, the leaves and the root are what's usually used, and it's usually said to be preferred that the leaves fresh are the best way to go for it, but you can also use the dried powder made from the roots. One of the other benefits to this plant that has been studied extensively in scientific research is the anti-inflammatory properties. You see, the leaves and the root of this plant contain anti-inflammatory compounds that have been found to be 86% as effective as aspirin at reducing inflammation. So a lot of the traditional uses for this plant were to reduce inflammation either in the gastrointestinal tract or on externally on wounds or with painful joints. And science has stated that this is actually a valid use for this plant. Now, one of the traditional uses for this plant that hasn't really been backed up by science for lack of study is pretty much everywhere it is native, it was used in some form to help with childbirth. In some places, it was used to aid in difficult labor. In some places, it was used to induce labor in women who were pregnant for too long. But especially in Kenya, some of the native peoples there make a decoction of the leaves and the root to take after giving birth to the child to help speed the delivery of the afterbirth. So this plant has many uses, and most of them have been backed up by science. So thank you again for joining me today. My name is Leanne from BatLadyHerbals. If you haven't found my blog yet, there's lots more information about this wonderful plant and many others on my blog at BatLadyHerbals.com. If you'd like me to come over and help you figure out what might be in your yard that could be useful medicinally or edibly, I do something called backyard tours. Feel free to contact me for information about those. Information for that is going to be down below. Down below you'll also find links to my Patreon, where you can become a patron and help support this channel as well as my blog and my endeavors. I also have a Teespring shop where you can find a lot of designs on t-shirts, things like that, that help to promote herbalism and hiking here in Central Florida. If you liked this video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you want to be notified of my upcoming releases, hit that bell, and have a wonderful day. Anywhere on or in your body. Hello, little ants. Thank you. Go back on your flower. Or stay on me. No, please don't stay on me. Can you not see the food right there?